Hi, I'm Sensei Steve here at Classical Martial Arts of Long Island, and we're going to talk to you for a couple of minutes about aspects of the Japanese martial arts, because here at our school we have both Japanese and Chinese parts of the curriculum. We have two different curriculums actually, one that's more the Japanese style, one's the Chinese style, and within the Japanese style there's subdivisions of what we teach. So I just want to talk to you for a couple of minutes and give you some context about the Japanese martial arts. So Japanese martial arts, that's a big term, and a lot of different styles of martial arts. Well, when we talk about them, we can broadly divide things that evolved in the island of Okinawa versus on the island of Japan proper. Right? Now, the Okinawa originally was its own individual kingdom called the Ryukyu Kingdom. And that area was taken over by the island of Nihon. It was taken over by the island of Japan. And well, whenever one group takes over another group, things don't always go that well. And there was some tension and such like that. But the Okinawans had learned and adapted martial arts from the Chinese, from the southern Chinese, and took inspiration of that, of course, with their own existent military tradition, and developed what we eventually come to know as Okinawan karate and Okinawan kobudo. Now, what do those words mean? Well, karate, most people know, means some sort of empty hand fighting, right? So originally, when that was brought over, developed, the term they used was tuite, which meant Tang Dynasty hand, because they were influenced by the fighting methods that came from the Tang Dynasty of China. And in Chinese history, the Tang Dynasty was very expansive and had enormous connections to other countries. It was a very broad and bold period, and the Chinese were one of the largest countries, actually the largest country in East Asia, and influenced broadly the other countries there because of political exchange and governmental dynamics, force dynamics of how powerful they were and who wanted to work with them, and trade and economics, and all those components that you could read about in history class. But from the martial arts perspective, the Chinese military skills and martial skills were very influential in these other countries. So in Okinawa, they called it, well, Tang Dynasty approach, Tang Dynasty hand skills, fighting skills, tuite. Eventually, that kind of got shortened to the word te, which just means hand. So it means, well, that guy's got hands, right? Hand skills. Okay. Well, that term was a broad term, and Okinawan martial methods include what we think of as punches, also kicks, open hand strikes, different types of movements, the classic forms that you think of when you think of karate, all those components, as well as joint locks, takedowns, right, submissions, that component. So it's a broad-ranging term. Now, it came eventually to be called karate. The reason it became called karate means empty, right, because it was empty hand skills. Well, that was to juxtapose the understanding versus what was called kobudo. Kobudo meaning the ancient martial ways, which are old weapons. Now, kobudo is just as valid a tradition as the karate traditions. And in kobudo approaches, they used weapons that the Okinawans used when they were oppressed by the island of Nihon. And so that included things like a staff or a spear, but more so things that were originally farming implements and moved to become martial tools. Things like axes, the kama, the traditional Japanese axe. Things like the tanfa, which is a traditional Japanese thresher for working with grains. The nunchucks, the nunchaku, which are very well known, especially because of Bruce Lee, but those originally were farming tools. And those farming tools, they could carry. They were prohibited from carrying weapons at a certain period in time, so they weaponized those other tools for personal defense. So we still practice those methods, and those methods are very good for hand-eye coordination. Those methods are very good. They're very enjoyable, they're fun, they're very historical. They also kind of teach you how to move in certain ways. So like when we use the kama, which is the axe, you have to turn it a certain way to get the blade to face the direction you want. So therefore, it requires you to be more precise. When we do the tanfa, which is the wooden stick with the side handle, you have to loosen your hand and tighten your hand to make it spin out and come back. So therefore, you have to learn to have the dexterity to open and close, soften and harden your fist, which can translate into better punching skills. Right? It also is just good dexterity, good training for the body, good training for the mind. Right? Additionally, then, if we go to the sai, which are the ones, it looks like the metal cattle prod originally for poking cows, but it's turned back and forth and requires even more dexterity in the fingers to reorient it and move it into different positions. So that's part of the kobudo curriculum, and there's more weapons in there. And in our school, we have both the striking arts, where we do an aspect of karate known as Goshindo karate. We have kobudo, the old traditional weapons. And additionally, we do Japanese martial arts that come from the island of Japan itself. So there you have samurai arts. And the samurai were versed in many different weapons, and especially the sword. So in the sword, we practice here at our school Toyama-ryu, the Toyama lineage, iaido, sword drawing techniques. And so those are derived specifically from the Toyama clan. And those are sword drawing techniques where we work specifically with the katana, the wakizashi, and the tanto. And we work on sword drawing, we work on cutting, we do bamboo cutting, we do very specific prearranged sequences, kata, forms in the air, as well as kumitachi, paired sword practices, and eventually we do batojutsu, which is where we put on armor and work on traditional fighting techniques that were derived or are from the samurai tradition. Well, if you lost your weapon, it got shattered, you got disarmed, and you were a samurai, you'd have to fight against an armed guy with no weapon. You might both be wearing armor, but that's not what you want to rely on. So that's where we get the skills known as Japanese jiu-jitsu, because ju and jiu-jitsu means to yield. So you'd have to yield to the oncoming sword. You can't block it. You block that sword, you'll lose your arm. So you'd have to yield, you have to reposition, right? You'd have to try to get control of the sword, control of the guy's arm, and therefore would have to momentarily joint lock him or throw him or project him. That's traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. So we do traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu techniques within our Japanese curriculum. Additionally, that's where judo comes from. For judo was adapted by the master teacher Jigoro Kano sensei. Kano studied traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu at the end of the 1800s and adapted the techniques so they could be done full force against a partner. And the partner would be able to take a fall and wouldn't die, because traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu techniques are trying to fight against the armed opponent and not be the guy who loses his life, right? So judo techniques derived from that are intended to have a sporting element, to be able to practice full on, very intensely, yet both people survive. Both people are okay. So in our Japanese curriculum, we have separate judo class to drill that, and we compete in Olympic judo style competitions, and that's one part of our larger Japanese curriculum. Additionally, the very, very famous and well-known aspects of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, well, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu comes actually from judo, moving to Brazil, and then being developed into that groundwork fighting method that has spread all over the world. Now in our school, we don't have a separate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. We do a lot of newaza, which is mat work, which is grown out of Japanese Jiu-Jitsu as well as Japanese Judo, but you can see a lot of similarities in there. So that's a little bit of an overview about the Japanese curriculum, about how those parts fit together, about the methods that come from Okinawa, from the island of Nihon, the methods that were derived from the Ryukyu Kingdom of Okinawa, and the karate, open hand approaches, as well as kobudo, as well as then what we saw in the island of Nihon, which was the sword techniques, the unarmed techniques, and eventually the competitive techniques that were derived from it. So hopefully that makes sense, and if you are interested in that, give us a call or visit our website. Come on down, try a class. We give everybody 2 weeks free to come try what we do, and you could experience all those different components of our Japanese curriculum, or, as I'll explain in a different video, our Chinese curriculum. Hope to see you on the mat. Have a great day.